A chilling silence hung over the world. It wasn't just the usual quiet of a sleepy town or the hushed murmurs of distant cities. No, this was something deeper, something unsettling. The stars shimmered above, indifferent to the small blue planet below. For centuries, humanity had told itself that Earth was forgotten, tucked away at the edge of the galaxy like a remote island in a vast, endless ocean. No alien invaders. No cosmic conquerors. Just Earth, hidden in its isolation, far from the interest of beings who traveled among the stars. At least, that was the story humans had clung to. But today, something had shifted. A strange signal had emerged, broadcasting from somewhere deep within the void of space. It wasn't a signal like humans had sent before, an attempt to reach out and communicate. No, this one was different, intentional, deliberate. A message intended to be understood, one that spoke of recognition and understanding. It came from beyond their understanding, an advanced civilization that had been watching, waiting, and now, apparently, had decided to act. For centuries, humanity had imagined scenarios where alien forces would arrive with the power to decimate, to invade. They had prepared for war, fortified their defenses, and whispered tales of extraterrestrial threats in their darkest corners. But they never expected this, an alien species that had watched and waited, their motives obscured, their intentions unknown. And now, Earth found itself facing the question it had always feared: why now? Why had they chosen this moment to reveal themselves? The news spread like wildfire across the globe. Satellites had picked up the strange signal, an anomaly that couldn't be dismissed. Astronomers, scientists, and leaders scrambled for answers. Was this a first contact? A warning? An announcement of conquest? The world's nations, long fractured and divided, suddenly had a common enemy, or so they thought. The problem was, the enemy wasn't attacking. They weren't advancing toward Earth with fleets of ships or armies bent on destruction. They were watching, waiting, observing. Among the chaos, a few key figures emerged. Dr. Amelia Kahn, a renowned astrophysicist, had spent years studying the mysteries of deep space. Her expertise in decoding unknown signals had made her a crucial player. On the other side, General Marcus Reyes, a no-nonsense military leader who had spent decades preparing for the possibility of a full-scale alien invasion. Now, both found themselves thrown together, forced to confront the enigma that humanity had never been prepared to face, a race of beings that might not want war, just understanding. "We've been waiting for this moment," the message had said. That was all they had to go on. 2 words. A declaration that implied more than it revealed. And now, questions flooded every corner of the world. Who were they? What did they want? And why had they chosen Earth? In a world that had spent generations imagining how they'd fight off alien conquerors, now faced a new dilemma. What if they didn't need to fight at all? What if, for the first time in human history, the answer was something much more profound, and far more dangerous? The uncertainty spread like a contagion, infecting every corner of human life. Governments scrambled to respond, their typical structures of power and diplomacy suddenly irrelevant in the face of a threat, or perhaps a non-threat, so different from anything they had imagined. Reports flooded in from military bases, intelligence agencies, and civilian observatories. Every nation tried to piece together the fragments of a puzzle they hadn't anticipated. But not everyone was convinced the aliens weren't hostile. General Marcus Reyes had spent his life preparing for worst-case scenarios. Decades of training and strategy had built his reputation, and he wasn't about to let go of that framework now. The message, "We've been waiting for this moment," wasn't just cryptic, it felt like a challenge. A warning. As if the aliens knew something humans didn't. "We've been waiting," he muttered, standing in the command center of a remote military facility, staring at the transmission on a massive screen. His team watched him, hoping he would provide answers. But Reyes wasn't a man prone to easy answers. "Why wait?" he asked the room, his voice sharp. "Why now? Why Earth?" Dr. Amelia Kahn, who had been studying the signal from a distant observatory, stepped forward. Her expertise in deciphering alien messages had led to breakthroughs in deciphering the transmission. "It's deliberate," she said softly. "They're not here to conquer us, at least not in the way we expected. They're here because they've studied us. They know we're weak." Reyes frowned. "Weak? They think we're defenseless. That we're insignificant," Amelia explained. "That's why they waited so long. Because they didn't need to fear us." Reyes felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just arrogance or ignorance driving their weight. It was indifference. A planet tucked away in the quiet corners of space, too small, too remote, too powerless to matter. Earth wasn't a threat. It was a curiosity, one they'd dismissed for centuries. But now, with their arrival, the question became unavoidable. Why did they care now? The scientists and military leaders debated endlessly, but the answer was clear to Amelia. The aliens hadn't come to destroy, they'd come to study, to understand. And that realization shook humanity to its core. "We need to ask ourselves something fundamental," Amelia said, turning to the gathered leaders. "Why are they here now, after all this time? Why are they reaching out to us instead of any of the other races they've ignored?" Reyes sighed and rubbed his temples. "And what happens if they decide we're not worth the wait anymore? If we're still irrelevant in their eyes?" The room fell into a heavy silence. No one had an answer. The world had prepared for war, but now faced something far more unsettling: inaction, observation, and perhaps the creeping sense that they had been seen, judged, and found wanting. For humanity, the terrifying truth wasn't just that aliens existed, it was that they didn't need to destroy us. They had all the time in the universe to figure that out. And they had decided Earth wasn't worth fighting for, or against. The real question now wasn't whether they would attack, but whether they would stop watching long enough to care. The silence stretched on, and with each passing day, the tension only deepened. The aliens were still there, their enigmatic presence growing more suffocating. Humanity's attempts to make contact or understand their intentions only seemed to provoke further confusion. The message they had sent, the one simple line, asterisk, "We've been waiting for this moment," asterisk, hung in the air like a ghost, whispering of a history either side fully grasped. In the chaos, General Marcus Reyes had doubled down on his strategy of vigilance and preparation. In the weeks since the signal arrived, his command had become an unrelenting cycle of readiness drills, recon missions, and tactical evaluations. The military had mobilized, deploying forces around the globe, fortifying positions and monitoring every anomaly, convinced the aliens had to be more than their cryptic messages. But nothing had come. No ships appeared on the horizon, no fleets of war machines descending from the stars. Just silence. The military bases grew quieter, their personnel increasingly unsure of what they were protecting Earth from. Reyes stood on the edge of his command center, staring out at the vast expanse of sky through the window. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The skies remained empty, but the sensation of an unseen presence loomed over every decision, every breath they took. "What are they waiting for?" he muttered to himself, more frustrated than ever. His training as a military man had always been rooted in the belief that threats should be confronted head-on, decisively. But this wasn't a war. Not the kind he had prepared for. Amelia Khan, meanwhile, had been working tirelessly, buried deep in her research. She had been studying not only the signal itself but the patterns of other races, those who had made contact or attempted first contact with alien civilizations. She had hoped to find answers, but instead, she found more questions. "These aliens don't think like we do," Amelia explained to Reyes one evening, as they sat in a dimly lit conference room. "They're not conquerors or invaders in the traditional sense. There's something else. Calculating. Patient." Reyes leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Patient? You think they've decided we're not worth the trouble?" Amelia shook her head. "It's not about worth. It's about understanding. They've spent centuries watching, studying us. They don't need us to fight. They've already judged us." Reyes stared at her, his jaw tightening. "Judged us? Judged us how? By what criteria?" Amelia hesitated, her gaze distant. By how we've lived. How we've fought amongst ourselves. By how we've ignored the stars, assuming we were too small to matter. They've watched all of that. And from what I've gathered, they've decided that we're still too fractured, too divided, to pose any real threat. Reyes frowned, his mind racing. So what, they're just going to leave us alone because we're too weak? It's not weakness they care about, Amelia replied. It's irrelevance. They've judged us as unworthy of their attention, not because they fear us, but because they believe we're insignificant. Our inability to unite, our endless conflicts, they've catalogued it all. And now, they're waiting to see if we'll change. Reyes stared out the window again, his thoughts swirling. The silence of space seemed to mock him. Change? What kind of change? Amelia sighed. A shift in how we think about ourselves. A realization that we're more than just the sum of our conflicts. That we're not isolated anymore, not just a fragile rock floating in the dark. They're waiting to see if we'll rise above our differences. Reyes' eyes narrowed. And if we don't? Amelia didn't answer immediately. She knew the weight of that silence. If humanity couldn't overcome its divisions, couldn't rise above its petty rivalries and mistrust, then the aliens wouldn't see the need to intervene. They had made their judgment long ago. And the longer they waited, the less reason they would have to stay. I don't know, Amelia finally said, her voice quieter than before. But we have to try. If not for ourselves, then for future generations. Reyes clenched his fists. The idea of waiting wasn't something he could accept. Not while the fate of the planet hung in the balance. But he could see now that the fight wasn't the one he'd prepared for. It wasn't a war of weapons or strategy. It was a war of belief, of unity, and of survival. And that, he feared, was a battle humanity might not be ready to win. As they stared out at the empty skies, the truth settled in. The aliens weren't coming to Earth because they feared what humanity could do to them. They were waiting to see if humanity could do anything at all. The tension on Earth had reached a boiling point. The aliens were still there, always there, watching, observing, judging. The silence between humanity and these enigmatic beings had stretched on for months, turning from a haunting void into a constant presence. The sense of waiting had become unbearable. Generations of human history had been spent preparing for war, and now, in the face of silence, the very foundations of what they believed about themselves were crumbling. General Marcus Reyes stood at the forefront of this crisis, his once clear orders and military certainty replaced by doubt. The military had mobilized, fortifying borders and preparing for something that might never come. Yet, in the quietest hours of the night, Reyes knew the truth. They weren't ready for what was coming. We've been expecting ships, fleets, armies. But all we've gotten are shadows in the dark, Reyes muttered to his trusted advisors, who now comprised a dwindling circle of people growing increasingly uncertain of their role. His voice carried the weight of someone who no longer knew what to prepare for. General, what are we supposed to do? One of his officers asked, his voice cracking. They're not attacking. They're not leaving. They're just there. Reyes ran a hand through his hair, frustration gnawing at him. We adapt. That's all we've ever known how to do. But the problem wasn't strategy or tactics, it was the unknown. The aliens had reduced humanity to uncertainty. The very fundamentals of their existence were being questioned. Was it pride, arrogance, or some fatal flaw that had made humanity believe they were too small to be noticed? Too insignificant to warrant attention from these beings? Dr. Amelia Khan had spent countless sleepless nights studying the alien signal, trying to decipher its meaning. The message was simple, yet profound, asterisk. We've been waiting for this moment. Asterisk, and it wasn't just words. It was a declaration that humans had no response to. Their waiting isn't about fear or hostility, Amelia had told Reyes repeatedly. It's about indifference. They think we're too small to matter. And until we change that perception, they won't act. Reyes stood in the command center, staring at the screen where the signal from the stars still flickered faintly. The silence between them and the aliens had stretched into a heavy, oppressive void. The once hopeful expectations of first contact had given way to dread. But Amelia's words echoed in his mind. Asterisk. We've been waiting for this moment. Asterisk. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning of destruction. It was a challenge. A test of humanity's worth. The question wasn't whether the aliens would attack. It was whether humanity had anything worth defending. They weren't watching to conquer, but to observe, to see if humans would rise to meet the moment. Reyes knew that if they didn't, Earth would remain just another forgotten world in the void of space. The irony wasn't lost on him. Generations had feared the arrival of alien conquerors. But the truth was far more humiliating. The aliens weren't interested in Earth because they feared humans. No, they had studied them, dismissed them, and decided they didn't care. Reyes had lived a life of certainty, always knowing what had to be done. But now, as he watched the aliens signal, he realized they had no enemy to fight. The only battle was against themselves. And that was the fight they might lose. In a distant research facility, Amelia Kahn sat hunched over her workstation, her eyes tired from staring at the incomprehensible signal. It had been months since she first decoded the message, and every analysis had led to one inescapable conclusion: the aliens were not here to destroy or conquer. They were here to observe and decide. She had spent countless hours poring over their data, trying to understand what it was that the aliens saw when they looked at Earth. The key, she realized, was not just the message itself but what it implied. The aliens had waited centuries before sending that signal. They had chosen the perfect moment, not because of anything special about Earth, but because they believed humanity had nothing to offer. Their observation isn't passive, Amelia whispered to herself in the quiet of the room. It's deliberate. They've judged us. But how had they judged? What criteria did they use? Amelia couldn't be certain. The more she dug, the less concrete answers she found. What did the aliens consider relevant anyway? Power? Technology? History? Strength? There was no evidence of any of these things when it came to humanity. Her thoughts drifted back to Reyes and the military, who had spent endless hours preparing for a war that might never come. They had been so certain, so confident, that the aliens would come to Earth with force, eager to dominate and control. But Amelia knew the truth. They didn't want Earth's resources, its people, or its land. They didn't see Earth as a threat or a prize. They saw it as irrelevant. The silence was deafening. The aliens were there, watching, waiting, but there were no footsteps, no armies, no cries of battle. Just the hollow void of space and the message still burning in Amelia's mind. Asterisk. We've been waiting for this moment. Asterisk. What did they want from Earth? Not resources. Not power. What they wanted wasn't material. It was something far more abstract. Could humanity even give them what they were looking for? Amelia closed her eyes, the weight of the question settling on her chest. They weren't asking for a defense or a submission. They were waiting for a transformation. A shift in humanity's core. A way for humans to prove they weren't the scattered, divided species the aliens believed they were. But how? And if they failed, what then? The clock ticked on. Days turned into weeks, and the world continued to hold its breath. Every corner of human society was affected by the looming presence of the aliens. Governments, once fractured and divided, tried to unite in response. Conferences were held, alliances formed, and resources pooled in hopes of preparing for a confrontation that might never come. But as the days passed, Reyes saw the cracks begin to show. It wasn't the aliens who were the problem. They had remained passive, silent, and distant. It was humanity itself. The divisions between nations, ideologies, and beliefs that had long plagued Earth hadn't disappeared. If anything, they had deepened. People clung to their old grudges, their distrust of one another growing sharper under the pressure of uncertainty. The signs of human fracture, the ones the aliens had identified, had only become more pronounced. Reyes couldn't ignore it any longer. Humanity had always been divided, bound by borders, cultures, religions, and politics. But these divisions had never mattered more than they did now. The aliens had judged them by these fractures. They had seen a species too consumed by its own conflicts to ever unite. And so, Reyes was forced to confront a truth he had long resisted. Perhaps the aliens weren't waiting for humanity to fight. Perhaps they were waiting for humanity to heal. Are we capable of that? He wondered, pacing the floor of his office. The question haunted him, because deep down, he wasn't sure. Reyes had spent his career preparing for war, but what if the real battle wasn't with the aliens? It was with themselves. What if, after all the years of training, all the preparation, what the aliens really wanted from humanity was something far more difficult? To change. He thought of Amelia's words. Asterisk. They're waiting to see if we'll rise above our differences. Asterisk. But what if they didn't? In the final days before the silence stretched into years, Reyes understood something crucial. The aliens hadn't come to conquer. They hadn't come to fight. They had come to test. To watch. And now, they had made their judgment. Humanity, in all its conflict and division, had failed. And with that, the silence grew deeper than ever before. The silence stretched on for years, and as the months became decades, humanity struggled to find its place in the cosmic void. The aliens had vanished, their presence felt but no longer visible. They had never come to Earth with fleets or armies, never descended from the skies in an act of war. Instead, they had observed from the shadows, judged from afar, and then disappeared, leaving behind a world that had learned nothing of what they truly sought. General Marcus Reyes sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the stars through the window that had become a familiar sight. His once sharp mind had dulled from endless reflection, from the weight of failure. He had spent his life preparing for battles, for wars that might come with fire and force, but this silence was far more agonizing. They had waited for humans to rise above their differences, to prove they were more than the fractured species the aliens had seen. And humanity had failed. Reyes knew the truth now, but admitting it to himself was harder than he ever anticipated. The aliens hadn't returned because they saw no reason to. Earth was still divided, still mired in conflict, still too fractured to ever unite under a single banner. Nations had squabbled, political powers had risen and fallen, but nothing had fundamentally changed. The aliens had judged humanity as irrelevant, as incapable of growth or evolution, and they had walked away, leaving behind a world lost in its own shortcomings. Reyes had fought for years to hold on to the belief that humanity could still turn the tide. That they could rise from the ashes of division and come together as one. But every attempt, every effort at diplomacy, every fleeting hope of unity had only revealed how deeply ingrained the old conflicts remained. He remembered the moment when Amelia Khan had confronted him with the truth. Her words, once a painful whisper, now echoed in his mind louder than ever. They're waiting to see if we'll rise above our differences. And they had watched, waited, and found humanity still lost in its petty rivalries, unwilling or unable to move beyond them. Reyes clenched his fists. What more could we have done? He muttered to himself, the frustration welling up again. The questions had lingered for so long, but there were no answers. Amelia Khan had disappeared from public view long ago, retreating into isolation to continue her research. The weight of failure had been too much for her to bear. In the early days, she had clung to hope, believing there was still time, that humanity could somehow change. But the years of silence and inaction had worn her down. The aliens hadn't returned, and they weren't going to. She sat alone in her dimly lit research lab, the walls lined with alien data, images, and theories that had once felt so full of promise. The research had been abandoned long ago, left to collect dust as the world around her continued to fall apart. What had once seemed like a breakthrough, the decoding of the alien signal, now felt like a cruel reminder of everything they had lost. Amelia traced her fingers over the faded screen, where the message remained, forever etched in human history, asterisk. We've been waiting for this moment. Asterisk. The message was not just a declaration but a final judgment. A judgment that humanity had failed to meet their expectations. They were never going to help us, Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her face. They were waiting to see if we'd ever help ourselves. Her research had once been driven by the hope that they could find some key to their survival, some understanding that would allow humanity to reclaim its place in the galaxy. But that hope had long since died. The aliens weren't coming back, and the realization had crushed her. The world had moved on, though not in the way anyone had hoped. Nations had struggled to survive, lost in their own struggles. War, poverty, and division still defined the human experience. The aliens had not come to fight, to conquer, or to save, they had come to test. And humanity had failed. Years had passed, but Reyes couldn't escape the haunting sense of failure. The same questions haunted him in his darkest moments. What had they missed? What had they done wrong? The military had trained for conflict, for battle, for destruction, but no war had come. And yet, here they were, a fractured humanity, struggling to survive in a universe that no longer seemed to care. He returned to the same observation center where he had first seen the alien signal, the same place where he had once felt hope flicker within him. Now, it was just a cold, empty reminder of what had been lost. The stars twinkled above, as distant and indifferent as they had always been. Reyes stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the void beyond. They waited for us to become something more, he muttered, his voice breaking. And we failed. The image of the stars became blurry as tears formed in his eyes. The aliens had made their judgment long ago, and now they had passed. Humanity had been seen, assessed, and deemed irrelevant. No fleets, no armies, no battles had been fought. Just silence. He could hear Amelia's voice in his mind again, clear and final. Asterisk. They've judged us as irrelevant. Asterisk. The words hung there, as heavy as the burden he carried. What now? He asked, the emptiness of his own existence weighing down on him. Was there a future beyond this? A future where humanity could rise from the ashes of its failures and find a new path? Or were they destined to remain trapped in a cycle of division, endlessly judged, endlessly waiting? Reyes closed his eyes and whispered to the stars. If you're still there, what do you want from us? No answer came. The silence stretched on. Far away, in a distant galaxy, the aliens watched from their quiet corner of the void. They had made their judgment long ago. Earth had failed. But even in their absence, they continued to wait, observing from the distance, perhaps still curious, perhaps still hoping. Or maybe they had already moved on, leaving behind the echoes of a species they had long since forgotten. Humanity remained in their shadow, lost in the silence they had left behind.